Welcome to Combat Theory Presents, a bi-weekly podcast about all things martial arts, fight science, and combat sports. Your host is Paul, the evil Professor Antonelli, and our newest episode starts right now.
We need to do a new intro where I mention you because you're like Rich Grendel, co-host of the show, joining me today. Rich, how are you?
I'm doing well.
In what could only be described as a shocking churnout, we've actually gone to produce 4 episodes in season 3, which is, I think, double the amount of episodes that we pulled off in season 2. So I have that going for me, and that is super, super
Congratulations,
nice.
Paul.
Thank you.
Happy to be a part of it.
Something you mentioned, I think 2 episodes ago when we were talking about decisions, was obviously like, if you don't like decisions, you know, the old adage, you know, get a finish.
Yeah.
And I think you alluded to, like, there is a lot of ways to work on getting finishes, or maybe you talked about that in the Point Muay Thai episode, is like working towards finding finishes.
Yeah, I think we touched on it obviously in both episodes, and I feel like finishing is a big goal in the sport of combat sports. That's what we want as fans and as fighters and as coaches. That's our main goal.
I was thinking about this in the shower, actually, when we were getting ready to make this episode.
Cool thought.
And because this is what I do when I'm in the shower. And I was thinking that, like, the only person that doesn't want to see a finish is probably the referee in the weirdest way possible. Because, like, when I'm a judge, if I'm judging, give me finishes all night.
Yeah.
I can't get, there's no one going to be upset with me, In refereeing, I think when you do see a finish, maybe a stand, like a knockout or a TKO or whatever.
Sure.
You're immediately like, did I stop it quick enough? Did I wait?
Should I give him more chances?
Should I have given him more time? Like, with how out was he? But everybody else, fans, the company, the judges, everybody wants to see the finish, right? Like, I think when I'm refereeing, I'm so comfortable with that going 3 rounds and me just kind of watching and being like, yeah, everybody's following the rules. That's nice.
Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, you're doing great. I love it. Just keep going, which I think is a weird thing. But on a serious note, Rich, you're never going to believe this. I actually went to college to do this exact show. So today we are going to talk about kind of what it takes to finish a fight, and I've actually done my homework on this one, which I've never really done homework on an episode before, and I've got some definite data, some real data that I have researched and I've written down, which I have going. You probably can't see that if you're watching on YouTube, but if you're watching from home, or you're listening from home, you definitely couldn't have seen that.
You don't also see my notes that I wrote down.
No,
and
you can actually, because paper works better on camera than.
Oh yeah, but you're not going to read this handwriting.
No one could read that if they could see it.
I can't read it.
Huh. Well, that's why we do what we do, right? So a couple of caveats today. Obviously, we're talking about finishing the fight.
Correct.
And I want to talk to you about one resource that I do have. So I was lucky enough in, I want to say 2019, to visit the UFC PI, which is the Performance Institute, where they do all kinds of rehabilitation, training, all this other stuff. When I went in 2019, they only had one location. It was just in Vegas. Now they have a location in Shanghai, and they also have a location either opening or soon to open in Mexico. And I do keep seeing advertisements for them hiring like trainers and stuff. And every once in a while, I'm like, maybe I should apply for that. And then I'm like,
it's a resume builder.
Yeah, for sure, man. But also, like, imposter syndrome is real. You feel like there's got to be 100 guys better than me to apply for that. So with that being said, a lot of the data that I'm going to talk about today is going to be from something called a cross-sectional performance analysis and projection of the UFC Athlete. And they have 2 volumes. The first one I have on paperback. This was published, I want to say 2018, and it's 80 pages. And it's all of the research they had done basically for when they had first opened the PI. Interestingly, they've now published a second volume, which you can download on PDF for free. These are free resources. Same name, a cross-sectional performance analysis and projection of the UFC Athlete, Volume 2 from 2021. It's nearly 500 pages.
Wow.
So there's a lot of research in there, a lot of stuff to unpack. Whether it's you're looking at fight finishes or you're looking at nutrition or weight cutting. So if you are an athlete or a coach, I would really, really encourage you to take a look at that. And they give you a lot of data. For example, fights are standing, which they refer to at distance. They call it at distance, 60% of the time in the UFC. So 60% of the time spent in the UFC, fights are standing. And then they further categorize another 15% of that is in clinch.
Yeah.
So they don't consider, like I said, they don't call it standing. They call it at distance.
Yeah.
So it would be like striking distance. And then another 15% in clinch. So about 75% of the time in the UFC, fighters are standing, which is super interesting because I think a lot of times when people think of the UFC, they think of like jiu-jitsu and wrestling and stuff like that. But it is definitely a heavily 75% of the time they are striking.
On 2 feet, yeah.
So we get a lot of data from them.
Right away, I'm already thinking, how can I apply that to my training? So for anyone listening to this is the thing about data is it's one thing to look at numbers, but it's another thing to figure out how to apply these findings into your training and then really incorporate like the principles and the understanding of how to, incorporate what you learn.
Literally, that's the conundrum, right? Because if I say to you, hey, 10% of the time this happens, it's good to know that.
Yeah.
What are you doing so that 10% of the time happens more if you need it to happen more? Or what are you doing to make sure that 10% never happens?
Correct.
Or if something is, 10% of the chance of this happening and you're spending 90% of your time training it, that's probably a really bad use of training time. So this is why data is important. And listen, this is a weird sport because, MMA, Muay Thai, these are all things that, fighting's been around forever, but we don't have the same data that like a basketball or a baseball or a football has. We've talked about that before, where it's like the football fan is very educated, right? And you're learning when you're watching a football match here in the United States, you're learning data constantly. They're explaining stuff to you. They're giving you the stats.
It's like the news. It's at the bottom of the screen, constantly scrolling.
So, I think that's one of those things that's really, really important. And the cool thing about the PI is that they've given us all this data. Now, look, we're primarily a striking show. We talk about striking mostly, I think.
Yeah.
But we're not limited to that. But I think, look, you can't argue with the fact that the UFC is doing the best job currently when it comes to data.
Absolutely, yeah. I know previous episodes, especially myself, I really harp on that I love one. A lot of what one is doing, I like a lot.
Hey, me too, man.
But that's again in-ring stuff. We specified that what's happening in the rings at one, we enjoy a lot. What I love the UFC does for sure is their ability to market. They're the best at that. And now data collection. It's huge there. I've also been fortunate enough to go to the UFC PI, and you get to see, them running tests, or they're constantly working with these athletes, correcting small little details.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah,
I think it's really fascinating. It's also interesting that, and I'm kind of talking out of pocket here a little bit. The impression that I get is that the UFC PI in the United States is really is like a tool. It's an accessory. So you, the coach, if you have a UFC fighter, can go there and use their facilities and get testing and all this other stuff. It does seem like in Shanghai, it's a training facility. They're teaching MMA. So there's a really cool things going on there, and it'd be interesting to see how that evolves. Now, there's some more data, and I know that you have a piece of this, so I'm going to give you a little something to start off with here. Win method, right? So according to the UFC, 50% of fights end with a decision. About 30% of fights end with a knockout or a TKO. And then about 20% of fights end with a submission. Now, I know that you had taken some notes on that when it came to what the finishes are that involve striking.
Yeah, I mean, so of course we have the knockout.
Okay.
Then we have the TKO.
Okay.
Then we have a referee or doctor stoppage, which oftentimes, even if it is stopped by a ref or a doctor, they'll sometimes still categorize it as a TKO. It's very odd sometimes. I think it's commissions.
I'm confused by this all the time.
Yeah.
And maybe I shouldn't admit this on the air or whatever, but a knockout, do they have to be out? Does the person have to be
not
out
unconscious?
cold?
No. So the way I was explained is a knockout, or let's start with a TKO. A TKO is when someone is not defending.
Okay.
A knockout is when they cannot defend. So basically, you're going to be more likely conscious when you're getting TKO'd.
Okay.
You can also be conscious if you get knocked out. For instance, a body shot. A body shot, you're still conscious, but you're folded over.
Okay.
When we start talking in more of the science terms that we can use for body shot knockouts, you can't do anything. You physically can't move. So it's not uncommon to see a body shot completely just shutter someone, and they give it a knockout rule.
Categorized as a knockout.
Obviously, we have the submission option as well in MMA. In all combat sports that involve striking, you have your TKO, your knockout, and your referee stoppage. MMA's got the submission, so that's why we kind of wanted to talk about the UFC specifically. I think that is a common one. All of us watch the UFC.
Yeah.
We're getting a lot of data from the UFC. A lot of the references I'm going to use are UFC fights.
Yeah.
So no more one talk. Today's a UFC talk day.
So, yeah, if you're not a UFC fan, maybe...
Still a good lesson to learn. You can stop listening when we get more in depth in the submissions or fast forward.
You could put us on low volume and still get the views. Thank you.
But yeah, so a TKO, that's going to be when a fighter is not intelligently defending themselves.
Okay.
So basically, if you're just taking shots, whether you're standing in the clinch or on the ground, you're just taking shots and you're not answering back with any form of defense or any fire back, right? A referee's going to stop it. KO is going to happen when you can't defend yourself. You cannot protect yourself anymore. So, again, going unconscious, that's a no-brainer. If you see someone just fold over, they basically look dead. They're not going to be able to defend themselves. But same thing with, like, even maybe a low kick. They might deem it a TKO, but I've seen some where they call it a knockout. Even though it's going to be on the commission.
Yeah.
It's when we talked about judging, again, there's a lot of official rules. There is someone's job on the side to record
what it is.
Yeah. Is this a TKO? Is this a knockout? Is this a referee stoppage? A doctor stoppage?
When I was refereeing one time, the official asked me what I wanted to call it, and I was like, "What do you want to call it?" And they're like, "I think it's a TKO." And I'm like, "Great."
My favorite is when it's submissions, and again, we've talked about some of these officials. They're not really well versed in the grappling game, and they'll be like, "Oh, that was a guillotine," and I'm like, "No. That was an arm triangle choke. What are you doing?"
Yeah. You know who would have known what kind of choke it was? Your buddy from Vegas. Tough enough. He would have known what it was.
I still don't know his name, but if anyone out there who listens to this and knows the ref I'm talking about, tough enough ref, bald guy, kind of looks like a lizard.
You want us to tag him in this post?
I said I'll come out of retirement.
Oh, my God. He's going to hit you with some choke you've never heard of. You're going to feel like a fool.
But yeah, so a ref or doctor stoppage, that's kind of when the referee or the doctor deems it's unsafe for the fighter to continue. They may be on their feet. They may still have their hands up. It may be in between rounds. We've seen it where guys get dropped real bad at the end of a round. The ref will give them a minute.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they'll call the doctor in right at the end and be like, "Look, how's he look? How's he feel?" Sometimes they're so wobbly on the stand-up that they'll call it before the next round.
I've actually heard a referee tell me that when he calls the doctor and he wants the fight stopped, that the ref maybe doesn't feel like he can do it right now, but he feels like the doctor could.
Yeah.
And they'll call it. Like, a lot of times when you see the ref calling in the doctor, sometimes it's a liability thing too. Like, where's this cut at? I'm not an expert in this. Let me have you look at that.
Sure.
But I have heard off the record referees say that when they call the doctor and they are looking for a stop.
Yeah, a good one for that is the Max Holloway, Brian Ortega fight.
Yeah.
I think it was going into the 5th round, so it might have been after the 4th, where they're looking at him in the corner and basically based on the language between the coaches, the fighter, and then what the doctor's seeing, they decide to not go into the next round.
I think that is I think that, as a referee, you're supposed to check each fighter in the corner, and I'm very interested to hear what their exchange is. Like, what are they talking about? Not so much like what are they talking about, but is the fighter responding? Mm-hmm. Like, is he intellectually able to respond to his coach? Like, he's had some time to whatever. Does he look like he's how does he look? You know, and I know that's a weird thing too, because like as a judge, that time doesn't matter.
Right.
But for me when I'm refereeing, that is something that I am aware of.
Yeah,
you know, like
for sure.
A ref taught me once that the first corner you go to is the corner you felt took the most damage.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I don't know if all refs do that. But it's now something I pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
Like which corner did the ref go to first?
Yeah.
You know, so that's something too that I think
I know a big part of your guys'
interesting to
job
watch.
too, just being around it and hearing is watching the eyes of the fighter.
Yeah.
And how they actually are looking, and then how they are looking. If their eyes are like drifting away, or
are they seeing birdies?
Yeah. If they're you know, they kind of look shell shocked.
I was ringside at a fight, and I thought it was really interesting that the fighter got a little rocked, and you could see the ref immediately started to pay a lot. You know, you can always see when the ref gets in closer and starts to really pay attention to the fighter. His body
goes from the middle to one fighter.
Looking at the fighter.
Yeah,
and his opponent's corner started to yell, "The ref's real worried about him right now," you know? And in my head, I was thinking, yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
so
that's a good thing to say, because, you know, you are limited as a corner to not talk to the other fighter directly, to not use profanity. So you can't just, you know, expletive, kill him.
Yeah.
You say things like, the ref is looking to stop the fight.
Yeah. Or, you know, you'll say the ref, yeah, exactly. Or, the one I hate is like he's tired.
Yeah.
Everybody yells that. That's a standard thing to yell. Like, get more creative.
Yeah.
I want to break them mentally. You know what I mean? Like, I want to say something that they've never heard before.
I love digging into their psychology. Yeah, he's looking for a reason to take a knee.
Yeah.
Give it to him. So another win in MMA, of course, UFC. We'll talk about submission. That occurs when a fighter taps out, whether physically or verbally. And then we have a technical submission.
Okay.
And that occurs when a fighter's limb or joint is broken, or if they're choked unconscious. So technical submission is a term you hear sometimes. Again, the fighter might have not have tapped. They might not have even been conscious. But the ref sees them in a submission that is now too unsafe to continue.
Yeah, Herb Dean had a moment there where he was refereeing someone, and he saw the arm break.
Oh, there's a few, but I think the Tim Sylvia fight is the most famous.
Tim Sylvia,
Frank Mir.
Yeah.
And no one saw it, so they booed Herb, and then the replay occurred.
You could see it pop and
snap.
break, yeah.
And again, you know, some fighters have broken their arms in fights, but it's the ref's job to protect a fighter, and he sees a broken arm happen so grotesquely, he's going to stop that fight.
I mean, it's unlikely, but it is possible that the fighter is not aware that they are that damaged.
Well, he was ready to fight right away. Which
Yeah.
again, it's not uncommon. Guys get kicked in their arm breaks, and no one knows the wiser until after the fight.
Well, I think that happened in the last one championship fight with Asa Tempao, where he broke his arm in the fight. And if you watch the fight, it doesn't look like his arm's broken. Yep. He's using it, everything's fine. He wins the fight, and they X-rayed it afterwards, and sure enough, it was completely severed.
Yeah.
So, you know, it doesn't always stop him.
Yeah.
You know.
There's that Jacare fight. It was his final fight, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was going for an armbar. Obviously, Jacare being so good at jiu-jitsu, you think he may escape, and then it just snaps.
Yeah.
And then that was his last. It was a horrible fracture, too.
That's rough,
Spiral.
dude. That is rough, dude. Okay, so how to score a knockout?
Mm-hmm.
What do I, is there a magic recipe?
So
what is the magic
there
recipe?
is recipes. There's ingredients to a knockout.
Okay.
So I'm going to go through kind of my thoughts on this. This is from my nearly 20 years of martial arts experience, what I've learned. Kind of go in the order of what I guess would be the easiest to digest.
So what you're doing is you're claiming expertise right now.
I'm claiming expertise.
Ooh.
So I'm not a knockout artist. When I competed, I've never hurt a fly. I have scored TKOs in kickboxing and Muay Thai, and that was just through
pure accident, is what you're saying.
Not accident. The first time it was, but then I realized, like, oh, I have a better gas tank. So I'm going to tire these guys out, and then I'm going to attack targets that will want to make them quit. A lot of times it ended in decision. That's why I know how to win decisions. That's what got me into judging. but also starting to kind of realize little things along the way. Now, it will really help me learn how to develop guys into knockout artists. Obviously, working with fighters,
Sure.
they all have their own talents and such, but you still start to build kind of an understanding of what is happening in the ring, what's the psychology, what are the exact techniques, where's the positions, etc. So this is kind of like, from my experience, how I'm teaching everyone out there what I've learned to kind of focus on.
Hit me.
So I think every good martial art that I've kind of learned or learned to understand follows this principle that I call distract, destroy. And basically what that means is there's no knockout I've seen, there's no finish I've seen where there wasn't some form of distraction, whether it was a feint beforehand, whether I'm setting it up and then I attacked you, whether you are distracted by your own attacks coming my way and then I counter you. So there's always something that typically happens before the strike that actually puts the guy out. So to understand that, you have to look at all the different factors. So like feints, like I said, punching the air, physical controls, right? You can do sweep attempts, things of that nature, something that's going to distract the guy.
Like off balancements as well.
Off balance, yeah. So that's just like a principle that I really kind of look at all the time. What's the distraction? Even in submission games, right? We know if I'm passing to side control and you want to use your underhook to get up, well, my pass distracted you, so as you go for that underhook to get up, now I'm locking a guillotine.
Yeah.
Arming guillotine is one of my favorite moves.
I think, this is a concept that's been around it's in fencing, it's in boxing,
Exactly.
it's in military tactics.
I think any battle-tested and proven method has this principle of distract, destroy. The weirdo martial arts where they're like, I'm going to stand here, you're going to run at me, and I put a beam in front of you and you fall over. That doesn't work. We know that.
Yeah.
There's no distract, destroy.
You
know.
So the reason my yellow bamboo is not working is because I did not distract him first.
I told you what was going to happen, and then you let it happen.
Bruce Lee wrote about this in the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. He called it progressive indirect attacking.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You're
getting progressively you're aggressing, you're progressing, but you're attacking indirectly.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going low to go high, or I go high to go low.
Correct.
I'm attacking the arm, but I really want the choke.
Yeah.
Or that's progressive indirect attacking.
Yeah. Greg Jackson, who's a phenomenal coach, if you heard the name, you know who he is. He always had this principle of two. So he taught all his fighters, you do one thing, and when that works, you use that to set up this next thing. And when that works, you go back to the first thing. And it's always this game of two. Your strikes set up your takedowns set up your strikes, your punches set up your submissions set up your punches, etc. Like you're saying, Bruce Lee all the way to Greg Jackson to Rich Grindle, we're all saying the same thing.
It's weird.
So, again, we're talking striking, we're talking KOs. So we're going to run through these. Attacking in combination, that just increases your chances of landing that knockout shot.
Yeah.
If I'm just throwing one punch at a time, I could find the right timing, the right placement. All those perfect factors we'll get into come into place. But more likely, if you're throwing two punches, you're doubling your chances. You're throwing three punches.
I think, too, I think that when you're throwing combinations, you often in training, all of those things are landing. But in real life, one of those three or one of those four is landing.
Yeah.
So if every four shots one lands, if I throw four single shots over, a minute versus I throw, four shots over 10 seconds, one of those is going to land. And if I can do that 6 or 7 times in a round, maybe I'm going to get there. And then if two start to land, now I've got a real knockout potential.
Yeah.
And
mixing up to that point, mixing up your targets. So if you're throwing two shots, maybe you go body head or head body, or like you were saying, go to the leg, then go to the head. Again, putting feints or physical controls, or even taking steps, changing an angle, that really can add on to your combinations, making it less predictable. Again, giving more stimulus, more distraction.
I think this is something that we're missing at every level because, according to our research, when we're looking at strike distribution, 77% of shots thrown in the UFC are directed towards the head,
Wow.
with only 9% of shots directed towards the legs.
Wow.
So they're headhunting 77% of the time based off of hundreds of fights
And
over
we hear
many, many years.
50% of fights end in decision.
Yeah.
I wonder if some of those numbers changed to the body and legs a little more if we
Yeah.
saw a little bit more finishes.
I mean, this is the thing. Like, just because this is something I always talk about. When when people watch the best, that just means they're the best right now.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of times people get kind of caught up on, well, that's what they're doing, so that's what I should be doing. Well, yeah, you should be doing that, but then you should be working on what the next level of the game is, right? Because the guys that were watching, Frank Shamrock that came in after him, Frank could get away with stuff that, Tito Ortiz couldn't get away with, right? Tito Ortiz gets away with stuff that, George St. Pierre was definitely not going to get away with.
Sure.
And George St. Pierre got away with stuff that,
Kamaru Usman
can't get away with. And then
So
Usman got away with stuff that
Bo Nickel's not going to be able to
exactly.
get away with.
So the game is evolving, right? Constantly.
For sure.
But that is something to remember. Right now, 77% of shots are directed at the head in the UFC. If that was to change a little bit, maybe that would provide more knockouts, right?
Yeah. So, combinations, that's going to help a lot. Mixing your targets up, again, going to those legs. Not for the sake of, I'm trying to finish him with leg kicks, but I want him to think low, so when I look low and I kick high, it's going to be more effective.
And we've seen people now attacking the calf, and all of a sudden it's ending in finishes, right?
Yeah. I've got a little piece on that when we get there. Yeah,
nice. I love it.
So, speed changes. This is one that I've been focusing on a lot more in the last couple of years because, again, when you start noticing patterns on how some of these fights are finishing, you want to develop in such a way that you are, like you said, like recreating what's happening at the top. And one of them that I noticed at the highest level is the speed changes. And basically what that means is you're not fighting at the same pace. You're not all going 50 miles per hour. Sometimes it's 50 miles per hour. Sometimes it's 5 miles per hour. Sometimes it's 100.
I think that is actually one of the things. I think this is one of the things that amateur fights or amateur fighters, young athletes, and maybe even professionals that are out there often think that fight at your pace means fight faster than them. And, he's going this way. I got to fight faster than he is. No.
Yeah.
You've got to find the speed or speeds that are working for you against your opponent, right? I can't tell you how often I'm trying to get fighters to slow the other guy down, slow him down, stall him, frustrate him. So you need to have that ability where you can vary your striking speed, vary your combination speed, create, I call it in my training, rhythm breaks, breaking the rhythm, because most people are fighting on that like pop, 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 pop. You've got to find
that comes from
times that
training.
you can,
Yeah.
you can go pop, pop, break, pop, pop, break, pop, 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 pop.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a training mistake that carries on to fighting, right? Because ultimately you're what you're trained.
Yeah. Yeah. Once you're in that cage, 90% of the time your instincts take over. And again, that's a form of distraction, like you were saying, to slow things down. Sometimes to go fast, it just means to go slow first.
Yeah.
So, like, if I'm slowing it down, instead of just being all irky-jerky and keeping this high pace, I slow it down. I jab the air like this. And then you get comfortable. And then I explode on you.
Yeah.
We see that a lot with the karate-style athletes. They're just kind of bounce, bounce, bounce. And then when you make a move that gives them that opportunity to attack, they're on you so fast that your butt's on the canvas before you have a moment to decide.
Will you be dressing up as the Karate Kid this year?
No, I haven't decided what I'm going as,
that's
but I
frustrating.
really like that idea.
I do. I like where you're headed there.
Okay. Did I say this? Range and weapon changes. So,
Okay.
if again we're doing something like Muay Thai or MMA, we're using UFC as our big focal point. If I got you hurt, right, and I just stay in punching range, and I'm just right in front of you in punching range, I give you an opportunity to see what's coming and make it easier for you to defend.
Yeah.
So again, to create an opening, I might need to step to the side, I change the angle, I change the range, and now I have a new opening, and you're going to respond in a certain way.
This is one of the hardest things about, you see this a lot when you're outside of the environment, right? Or when you're watching from the outside, where a fighter hurts the other guy, and instead of slowing down in a moment to really kind of think about, okay, now I need to finish.
I need to pick a shot. I need to set something up.
Let me slow down. He's hurt. I can slow down a little bit and really pick the shot. They almost go into I have to do it right now.
Yeah.
Well, probably not. If he's hurt, you have some time to figure out what that is. And we're talking about, milliseconds and millimeters. We're not talking about, 4 minutes or something.
And again, that comes from training. Are you drilling? Oh, I've got someone hurt. Do I pick up the pace now, or do I slow down?
That's a drill that, as a feeder, I used to do a lot, where I would simulate like a flash knock, when he's a little rocked, and then create an opening for the fighter. But it varies, so the fighter has to see
in the moment.
What is it?
Yeah.
And if that's not something you're training, don't expect it in a real fight.
It may come, or again, you might get the finish just staying in the same range. But we're talking about, again, what I've seen, my personal catalog of data. I take notes on, this was a TKO, and this guy cut the angle twice, and he went from a punch range to an elbow range, or he went from punch range to a knee range and finished with a kick. So again, those range changes, it is another form of distraction. If you're 4 feet away from me, I get comfortable with that. Well, now you distract me by getting 2 feet away from me.
Yeah.
And then when I go to counter that, you switch back into an opposite stance. So now you're in a roundhouse range. I have no time to adjust. I'm always a step or two behind.
I think that this is something that we don't do a very good job as coaches of doing, is teaching ranges of combat.
Yeah.
And teaching people long range combat kicking, mid-range combat punching,
punch, long knees.
Yeah. Sure.
Short
knees.
roundhouse.
Closer, you start to get into elbow range, clinch range, takedowns.
Probably a little more side knee than straight knee.
Yeah. You have to hook your knee in, curve knee in. But a lot of people, unfortunately, they're teaching striking as striking.
Yeah.
Like you're in the
strikes themselves.
Yes, you're striking. Well, there's a big difference between what I'm going to do, like a long teep, versus a short knee, right? Or there's a big difference between like a spear knee, where I'm really pressing my knee out from mid range without an attachment, versus I'm in clinch throwing a knee.
Yeah,
those are very different things.
Yeah, and they're going to go to different targets. As we talk, different targets do different damage.
That's one of the things I think as coaches, you need to do a better job of teaching your athletes, hey, this is the range I'm in. These are the tools. This is the purpose. And then again, the ability for you to move from range to range.
Yeah.
He elbows me. Oh, he's out now. He's in. That could be incredibly frustrating for a fighter.
Oh, yeah. I mean, didn't we just see that with Sean Strickland and Adesanya? He was saying, I can't get my jab down.
Yeah.
Where's my low kick? And those two weapons, that's what he's so focused on. He didn't have an answer because he's focused on attacks as opposed to range changes. When he would go to the clinch, he had success. He just never actually stuck with it.
Yeah.
So, again, I think that's a huge mistake a lot of coaches, myself included, I did for a long time. We're in front of each other. We're going to throw this punch-kick combo. And then when you really look at it objectively, that kick doesn't make sense there.
I think that's one of the big differences between instructor versus coach. Mm-hmm. And I talk about that a lot in privately, where I say, like, I've had great instructors in my life. There's a lot of people out there who can teach really, really well.
Yeah.
A technique. Hey, I'm going to show you an armbar. I'm going to show you a cross. And they are very good at teaching it. Mm-hmm. There's another level to that, a level of coaching where you're explaining the science of fighting. Yeah. That's what you're doing. And if you're negating the science and the understanding of range, and I say this all the time, like, if I was teaching you a rifle course, the first thing that I would teach you in the rifle course would be the effective range of your rifle, right? Like, if you have a rifle that can shoot 500 yards and you're trying to shoot 1,000 yards, you're going to miss every time.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, you probably wouldn't, bring a sniper rifle into a small house. Doesn't make sense, right?
God, that would be badass. Protect your home with a sniper rifle.
Twice as big as your body.
So speaking of that, right? Another principle we can look into is how the position in the ring or the cage can increase your chances of scoring a finishing blow. If they're against the ropes, if they're in the corner,
Sure.
or again in the cage doesn't have as strong of angles, right? But it's still pretty disadvantaged to have your back against the wall. This is where we see a lot of guys get knocked out. Not all knockouts occur here, but we see it very frequently in the UFC. When someone gets hurt, what do? They back up. Where do they find themselves? Back to the wall. This gives the striker the ability to kind of read their movements, because now their options are limited. They can't move back anymore.
Yeah.
So what are they going to do? They're going to move left. They're going to move right. They may come forward, or they're going to stay still. I can use my position, having the center of the cage, to really dictate how I'm going to play this game. Am I going to make them miss, then make them pay? Am I going to be aggressive, set up a body shot, cut an angle, finish with a head kick? I have these extra options to where they don't. So that's a huge advantage. So position in the cage. Again, if you're listening to this, you hear that, you go, good thought.
Yes, I agree.
Practice
Position.
ring control. Go to your coach. How do I control the ring? How do I keep the center? How do I get back to it if I lose it?
This goes like, look, when it comes to ring control, ring craft, if you will, cage craft, if you will,
Generalship.
Generalship. Okay, these are things that have to be trained.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because there are some gyms that have a ring, that have a cage, that have these things. I don't think that you have to have those to be successful. It helps. It helps.
It's a great tool. But a little tip for you guys who have gyms that don't have those: get some jump ropes. Create a ring on your open mat. Create an octagon on your open mat. A lot of fighters I've worked with, we've done this because when you travel and you go to other gyms, they don't have it. So if they don't have it, but I'm at home, I'm so used to training in a cage.
That's tough.
Yeah, get used to it. Again, imagination goes a long ways in this game. So if you have those physical objects to train with, that's a huge help. But I think sometimes mentally practicing, I'm imagining I'm in the ring. I'm imagining I'm in the cage.
I've also known gyms that have all those things that never use them.
Or don't teach ring control.
Yeah,
it drives me nuts when I see a pad holder in a cage and they're holding pads and then they put their back to the wall, or like the striker will hit and then they put their back to the wall. This is one of the big things when I get fighters coming to work with me. I often don't have enough time to teach them everything. So one of the first things I say is, if they come to work with me, I say, I'm going to watch you shadow box, and if I see you can't control the ring, that's what we're going to learn. Because to me, that is something I can teach you that you can take away in a day or two's practice, that you can, once you understand ring control, it's not rocket science.
Yeah.
But it takes drilling, and it takes understanding, and if you don't have a coach showing that, or he doesn't have a drilling system in place, you don't build that skill. It doesn't come natural. So you're giving up position in the ring or losing good positions without even knowing it.
No, I agree completely.
And then that goes into breaking your opponent's base. Or they help you out and they break their own base, which is super common. We were just talking off camera. Fighters have these exploitable habits.
Yeah.
And a common exploitable habit is they bring their feet together. They
rhythm stepping.
Right, rhythm stepping. They bend over, right? Instead of slipping with their shoulders, they're more or less putting their head off to the side, which again could dodge some strikes for them. But if you're in an unstrong position, your base is weak, those strikes do double damage.
These are all things that stylistically look really cool when you're training by yourself. I mean, I hate to say that, but
no. I mean, I didn't come off the couch one day and became a Muay Thai phenom. But, these are things I've learned over time that I myself for years did. We talk about rhythm stepping.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
I know for a fact I was going through old videos and I can pinpoint the last video of me rhythm stepping, because I learned soon after that how to drill it out of my habit. And it takes time. I tell guys it takes about 3 months of diligent drilling to get rid of a bad habit.
And that's very mindful. And the truth is that after that 3 months, that habit's probably still there, but you're fresh and you're not tired and you're not hurt.
Yeah.
So there's a strong possibility when you're not fresh or you're not, hurt, or when you are hurt, I should say, or you're high stress, that habit comes back.
It may come out. Yeah.
Right. So these are things that you have to create stress inoculation. You have to train when you're tired sometimes. You have to train when you're hurt sometimes. You have to get used to what those things feel like.
Yeah.
Right. But
so going into all those things, again, the main one being distract, destroy, those two words, basically, when I teach my guys, it's coming down to these factors of, everything I just stated. The goal is to try to combine these. You don't want to just focus on position of the ring, because position in the ring means nothing without an attack. So then, okay, I'm going to attack. When am I going to attack? Well, let me catch them on a broken base. How do I do that? Well, when I throw my right hand, they slip their head off too far. So I'm going to throw the right hand, but I'm going to distract them and throw combination. I'm going to go to the head with a head kick. Okay, now they're hurt. Well, now I'm going to fake the right kick. They have nowhere to run, so I'm going to left knee them to the liver. I've changed target. I've changed range. So the goal ultimately is making a combination of these principles. If you work in combination of these things, you're more likely securing stronger attacks, which can lead to knockdowns, which can lead to knockouts. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I look to focus on for my fighters getting knockouts.
I think that you said something there that I think was super valuable, and it's that your fighter has to have that education that when they start to see these things, when they start to see the mistakes, right? Typically what I always tell my guys is that you're going to see the mistake before you can act on it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to see it in the ring. Maybe you see it once and it's a fluke. So you kind of have to test it. Oh, every time I do this, he does that.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. I can get him to repeat that action. Then the next level of that is, okay, I identify the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I can get him to reproduce the problem. Then you have to figure out, how do I manipulate that problem? And that's what fight IQ is to me.
100%. That's what I look for when I'm working with guys. If I see that without me teaching them this, if I see that they can discover patterns and then exploit those patterns on their own, that kind of is like a sigh of relief, because I go, oh, this is going to be easy to teach him how to finish. When it's guys who fall in love with the overhand, and all they want to do is everything they can to get the overhand. But guess what? They're a decision fighter. And again, that's nothing wrong. Some of the best fighters in the world are decision fighters. But why aren't they getting finishes? They're probably not varying up their attack. They're probably consistently in one range. They're not mixing up these principles that could score them higher damaging strikes.
This is something, too. It's the culmination of damage. I used to do this drill where I'd say, where a guy kicks my leg. And I'm like, okay, that hurt. Kick me again. You kick my leg like 5, 6, 7 times. And then I'd be like, all right, my leg's really hurting now. So I'd say to my class, like, this is when I was younger and stupid. I'd say to my class, okay, my leg really hurts now. Which kick was it?
Yeah.
Right? And some of the newer people are like, oh, it's the last one. And I'm like, no, it's the culmination of damage over time. Mm-hmm. Right? So if you're hitting all of these targets repeatedly over and over and over again, then you get that knockout shot. But it's not... Typically, this is the cumulative damage over time that gets you that shot, you know? And that's the thing where it's like, if you're looking for that just one hard shot that's going to land, that might win, that might get you the knockout, but you might miss that a lot. And we've seen that in amateur. We've seen that in pro, where guys are really loading up shots and they're just wasting energy because they're not landing.
Yeah, it's again, if you listen to some of the higher level guys talk about knockouts and how to finish fights, one of the common things is they talk about speed is power, right? And precision is one of those other things. And so we're talking about speed and precision over how far back I can reel my hand before I throw. So we're talking about wasted movement now. What we want to do is actually score. We want to put our fist on the face in a way that is going to put them in, and again, that's catching them off base, that's setting them up, exploiting a habit, that's varying up the attack where they don't see it coming. Mike Tyson does a great job of explaining. You can find a bunch of Mike Tyson videos explaining finishes, and he, as a lot of guys will say, it's the strikes you don't see that hurt. You want to disguise your strikes. You want to hit them in a way that they never thought they got hit with that thing. Again, distract them, and then destroy them.
Do you think we can get Tyson on the show? Probably.
No.
Okay.
We don't have a budget for that, and then I don't have the patience.
I just wanted to run that through.
So we talked about all these principles that can get a knockout. I would like also to mention the targets, the main targets, I should say.
Go ahead.
So the specific targets we're looking to hit are the jaw, the temple, behind the ear, the liver, right?
Yeah.
This is something I find very interesting. A lot of guys don't know where the liver's at. They'll see a guy get punched in the spleen, which is under your left arm, and they'll be like, "Nice liver shot." I'm like, "Not at all. You have one liver. It's under your right arm. It's right here under your rib cage."
Yeah.
And that's a very good target to get really comfortable attacking.
The way that I often will identify to people is if you put your right arm tight to your body, the back of your arm where your tricep is, the lowest part of your tricep is touching where your liver probably is. And that's the easiest way to kind of figure that out.
Nice,
right?
yeah.
So if you see where his guard is and where his elbow is, you want to be just behind,
just
and
above.
a little up.
Yeah,
you know,
I like that.
And that's kind of where that is. Now, if I can get his arms to get away from being tight to being a little bit more open,
maybe bring him up.
bring his arms up.
Yeah.
Okay, I've exposed the liver, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's somebody once taught me that a really good liver punch, my thumb touches their tricep.
Oh,
You know, so there's a lot of ways to look at that.
yeah.
But yeah, I have an anatomy and physiology background. I can't tell you how often someone would tell me at work, like I work in another job that's interesting, and somebody would come up and they'd be holding like their like low intestine, and they'd be like, my stomach hurts, and I would be like, nope, your stomach's not there, and I'd move their hand all the way up towards like their chest, and I'm like, yeah, your stomach's sitting on the other side, like above the spleen. So it's like, people, even fighters, have a very poor understanding of anatomy. And that's the craziest thing, because I think as a coach, as a fighter, you should know at least
the bare minimum.
the base. If we're going to do a liver shot, where's the liver?
Yeah.
Right? My personal favorite is when you're teaching not me, but like when someone's teaching a lefty and the class is doing a liver shot and you have the lefty throwing the shot on the other side.
Oof.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
I get it. You're just trying to duplicate the movement and just get everyone going, right? But like,
it's not what it is.
That's not what it is. You're punching them in the spleen or stomach. You know what I mean? Like that's not working for me.
The other two targets I wrote down was the solar plexus.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And then the calf kick.
Yeah.
So back in the day, about 4 years ago, majority of people kicked
hundreds of years ago.
People kicked above the knee.
Sure.
And you can secure TKO low kick that way.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of work. The calf kick has become a very evident target these days. Like I said, the past 4 or 5 years, we've been seeing it the most used. But I have a coach who, going back 10 plus years, he was showing us calf kicks, and the other coaches in the room were scoffing, going, if that worked, the pros would be doing it by now. So it goes to your point.
I think it's very unfair.
Yeah.
I think it's a very unfair statement.
People aren't looking for new things. They're not looking for the next thing. And they're stuck in the way.
It's not
of
even
what
necessarily
they see.
the new thing. It's the thing that was around 400 years ago or 500 years ago.
He learned it
what
from
I'm saying?
capoeira. He said in capoeira, it's one of our devastating strikes, kicking the calf. And by the way, it devastated us in training. I hated it so much. Every time I went with him, I was like, I am just staying as far away.
Was this like a regular class, or were you doing capoeira?
No, this is like MMA training.
Oh, man.
Training.
Okay, yeah, that sounds terrifying. Yeah, I think when you're kicking the leg, you're trying to attack any area that's got soft tissue.
Yeah.
I don't want bone, right? Obviously, I'm not looking for shin-on-shin contact. I'm not looking to connect on the knee. I'm not looking to connect on the hip. Yeah. I don't really understand why sometimes you'll see people throwing like a rear round kick into the hip.
Yeah.
That's not really...
It's a risky move. The hip bone's so hard.
Hip bone's hard.
I've broken my foot on the hip bone, going for the liver, but being off target and hitting that hip or hitting the elbow.
You want the soft tissue targets of the body, right? Karate combat, you can't kick the thigh anymore, right? It's calf kick or above the waist, right?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that what karate combat's trying to do is they're trying to discourage Muay Thai.
Yeah.
They don't want, it's karate. They want to do, karate combat.
And again, that is an old school karate move.
Yeah.
Calf kicking is super common. If you watch Kyokushin karate guys, they're consistently kicking calves. They kick thigh too, but, it's not uncommon to see calf or low ankle kicks.
I think, and I'm by no means a karate guy, But I think it's important to understand that in the 70s, a lot of karate guys would fight Thai guys, and it wasn't like the Thais always beat the karate guys. It was a very like
Oh, it's very contested.
50-50 kind of. It wasn't even in Thailand when karate people would go to Thailand, it wasn't like devastating. I think karate unfortunately has been very watered down in the United States, and it's more of a business than it is a combative martial art now. But that doesn't mean that karate school if you're a karate school, don't come at me. I know that you could be great. My buddy has a karate school for kids where they just knocking people out in competition. So like,
yeah, I mean, again, Wonderboy Thompson, his gym, we go to the IKF events often, right? And we see the World Classic. Man, they have some of the most entertaining, most vicious amateurs. Wonderboy Thompson, the nicest guy in the game, but man, that guy is vicious in the ring.
Kickboxing is a multifaceted martial art. You can't say that there's anything that's not kickboxing. Here is another that concluded your targets, right?
Yeah.
All right, here's another interesting statistic. Did you know, and I guess this makes sense, the lighter the weight class that you are in, the more likely you are to end with a decision.
Yeah, I've recognized that. And I've read some of these stats before, so I think if you've been watching the fight game long enough, 125ers, 135ers.
Yeah.
Until recently. They're typically going to go to decision. Then you get the 45ers, and then once you hit about 170, 180, you start to really see a consistency in finishes.
I have a good statistic from the UFC on this. Men's flyweight, which is like the lightest men's division, 54% chance of decision.
Yeah.
Where men's heavyweight goes down to only 35% chance.
Nice.
So there's a 20% chance reduction for men's flyweight. Women, much, much more, okay? Women's strawweight, 72% chance of decision. And the largest weight in the women's class right now, the women's featherweight, which is 145 pounds, 41% chance.
Nice.
So there's a 32% or 31%
from the
swing
lowest
there from the lowest to the highest, and about a 20% in the men's. So, this is also something, if you're in training and you're a women's strawweight, you need to have good cardio.
Prepare for all 3 rounds.
You're ready for decision-based fights, and you really, really got to learn how to win decisions, right? Yeah. And that's why something like the Point Muay Thai, these things that we've been developing where they teach you how to win decisions is so valuable, right?
Yeah, I love that stat because, again, I tell my athletes, everyone's different. We're all on a different journey, but you do have to respect the stats. They're there for a reason. You may be the outlier, but you still need to understand your division.
Yeah. Hey, if you have great knockout power as a strawweight, you're probably going to win a lot of fights.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
if you're a great knockout fighter, but you don't have a gas tank for 2 rounds.
You might be in trouble.
Now we're looking at every opponent you have has had a majority of decisions, but you don't have the capability of going to decision.
Meanwhile, if you're a heavyweight and you don't have knockout power, you've got to get in the gym, my friend. Yeah. We got to work on that.
Yeah,
that's a real problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'king seen that, right? There's a lot of guys who don't have knockouts on their record, and then you're going against someone like Derek Lewis, who again, he's the KO king. If you want to do a knockout study of all those principles I talked about, go watch Derek Lewis because he's really good at all those things, slowing things down so he can explode, positioning guys to where they have their base broken. He's going to be patient. He's going to change targets. He's going to change weapons. He's a perfect example. He's not a guy who goes to decision often.
No.
Right?
No. Meanwhile, I hate to say this, but if you look at somebody like a George St. Pierre, who was a dominant fighter.
Phenomenal.
Man was a decision fighter.
Yeah.
He would wind you down and get you to decisions.
That was the number one complaint about his career, right?
Kind of boring.
Boring to the uneducated.
Yeah.
And I get it, like, as a fight fan that, again, majority of people want to see knockouts and TKOs.
And you want to see definitive.
Yeah.
I think everybody wants to see a definitive fight.
Yeah.
Right? And the nice thing about the knockout is that is definitive. There's no, it's hard to question. It gets questioned.
Yeah.
But it's hard to question a knockout.
Yeah.
It's very easy to question a decision, you know?
getting to knockouts, again, we want to kind of talk about as much as we can. So the 5 stages of a knockdown.
Okay.
According to Big John McCarthy.
Ooh, all right. I'm interested.
And we like Big John.
Yeah.
He's you want to talk about a guy who's developed the sport.
The
who's
OG.
been one of the original.
Heavily
and
involved.
Yeah.
Heavily involved in the rules, actually, of the UFC.
Of
the unified,
of the
MMA
country,
rules.
right?
The Big John McCarthy.
Call back to our judging.
Yeah,
episode.
absolutely.
Go check that out. So these are the 5 knockdowns. So it goes in stages, right? We got stage 1 being the least concerning knockdown to stage 5, which is the most concerning knockdown.
And this is him as a referee. Watching knockouts.
And that's a good point because I think this is probably something judges should absolutely study. It's something that I haven't really thought about until recently, to where I'm like, should I be considering scoring certain types of knockdowns higher? When we did that Shevchenko episode, we spoke about when she got dropped.
Yeah, level 1 knockdown.
And that was a level 1 knockdown. So I have to look at that. Is that a 10-8 scoreable knockdown? Or if it was a level 4 knockdown, which is when we get into the definition, that's going to be a lot more devastating looking, more fight potential. So as you said, a ref is looking at this, and he's looking at it as a concern to stop the fight.
Yeah. Hit me.
So level 1, a fighter gets dropped going backwards, but their arms catch themselves.
Yeah.
So, again, maybe I take an overhand, and I'm still looking at my opponent, but my hands drop.
It puts you on your butt.
But I can catch myself. Generally, they either pop up or they're able to fight from guard.
In the example you just gave, Shevchenko rolled backwards.
She caught herself, did a back roll like a jiu-jitsu class, and kept it going. So, again, not as concerning. A fighter should be able to continue to fight from them.
It's a knockdown.
It's a knockdown.
Number
2. Fighter gets dropped and goes backwards, and their arms do not catch them. So maybe their head bounces, but they're still, maybe their eyes are a little out of it, but they went backwards.
Yeah.
And that's a big part, because we tend to, let's say we don't get knocked out. Maybe I trip. Maybe I slip. Maybe I fall. Our natural sense of balance is either going to make us fall forward or most likely fall backwards. So when we go to level 3, a fighter gets dropped and they fall sideways.
Okay.
This is a clear sign that their motor skills are disrupted, right? So when we get hit strong in the head on one of those key targets, the jaw, behind the ear, the temple, we're getting disrupted signals. Our brain is sloshing in the skull, and it's disconnecting certain things. So if you fall sideways, that means your body doesn't know how to put the feet underneath you. It doesn't know how to put your butt or your hands underneath you. So if you're falling sideways, a referee is going to look at that and be like, I might need to stop this soon.
This guy's global positioning system has been affected.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get you. The GPS, no good.
So then we go to number 4. So a fighter gets hit and they drop forward, face first typically. Whether their hands catch them or not, this is a clear sign that, again, this is a damaging strike, because most strikes are going towards you.
Yeah.
So the force should go through you or to the side. But if you're falling forward, again, that's a clear sign that there's a massive disconnect in your motor skills. So your functions are off. That means your brain is severely damaged at this point.
Okay.
And then level 5, a fighter gets hit and they collapse straight down.
All right.
He used the word, it looks like they implode. And the example he gave, which is great, is Gabriel Gonzaga versus Mirko Cro Cop.
Yes.
Kicked him in the head, and Cro Cop fell down in such a way that it looked so unnatural, and then his leg's
been behind his. The thing that always concerns me is when you see like the back of their heels touch their butt. Like, oh shit, this guy is done. He's out. Yeah, that's a very scary knockout.
I think I like to point out. So those are shots to the head, right? And again, this is very, I think, important as a fight fan to look at, because now you're a little more educated on how someone gets knocked down and how a ref is looking at it. So if you see a level 3, 4, or 5, you know that ref is close to possibly stopping that fight. So you can look at your friends and try to be like, that was a level 4 knockdown.
Level 4 knockdown, my friend.
Yeah, he's
hashtag combat theory.
So getting hit in the head for me doesn't hurt. And I've talked to a lot of fighters. It's not painful necessarily to get hit in the head. It's more shocking. There's more of like a
system reset.
Yeah, and again, it's not good. I'm not saying get hit in the head more than getting hit in the body, but it is very important to understand that getting hit in the liver and the solar plexus, as we spoke about,
painful.
it's very painful. And the reason being is there's more pain receptors on our liver and more pain receptors in the center of our chest cavity, and it's covered in nerve endings.
Yes.
Specifically the vagus nerve, which is also what is affected when we get hit in the head. So the vagus nerves, essentially, from what I understand, what Google told me.
I'm with you.
You know this more than I do.
I'll let you know when you're wrong.
Yeah. They control functions, right? They control our involuntary functions. So if we get hit in such a way to where our vagus nerve is stimulated, that explains why when you get hit in the solar plexus, you get hit in the liver to cause a knockout, you can't uncrumble, right? If you've ever been dropped this way, you understand what I'm talking about. You get hit in such a way, it's so painful, and you can't do anything about it. Breathing is harder to do. You curl up in a ball, so coming out of that ball is harder to do. It's very difficult, and that's because your vagus nerve is stimulated, and that controls your functions.
Yeah. I mean, you have to understand that, so a little bit more on the vagus nerve. This is a nerve that controls your lungs, your heart, and your digestive system.
Sounds important.
You can't breathe. Your heart's not functioning the way you want it to,
Yep.
and you feel like you're about to throw up.
It's awful.
These are bad signs, right? Interestingly, something that you kind of alluded to as well is that there are no nerve endings in the brain.
Yeah.
Okay, so when people say, I have a headache, your head doesn't hurt. There's something going on outside of your brain that's sending a signal to your brain, and that's causing your brain to hurt, right? So when people are always like, oh, I have this terrible headache, there's something wrong with my head, probably nothing wrong with your head, right? So that's why, like, if you get hit hard and your brain bounces off the side of your skull, right? Yes, you have a traumatic brain injury, right? But it doesn't hurt. Right. Now, if you have soft tissue damage, nose, eyes, mouth, there's going to be a little bit of discomfort there, but probably you're going to be out a little bit, right?
Oh yeah.
We've all had that fighter that gets knocked out, and for the next 2 hours they keep asking like,
"What happened?
What happened? Did I win?" No, man, you didn't win.
When's the fight?
Did I win? No, you didn't, my friend.
Going to that, another nerve kind of strike is the calf kick, as we mentioned before.
Absolutely.
Not the vagus nerve, though. Do you know the nerve? Because I had to look it up.
The nerve in the calf. Oh,
oh yeah. Don't worry, I didn't know. I had to go. Perennial nerve. Perennial nerve.
Okay.
So apparently, this is a super important nerve. It controls your plantar flexion, which is your ability to point your toes.
Yeah.
So when we see guys getting what is called drop foot, they're getting hit in that perennial nerve, and it's being stimulated in such a way that the fighter can no longer control lifting or pressing down that foot. So it's basically just a useless limb at that point.
That's why when you see like the dead leg where people can't use their leg.
Yeah, they try to step and there's nothing there. They can't control it. It's very interesting because, again, when we kick the thigh, I was always taught we're kind of aiming for the sciatic nerve, which is also very painful, but because of all the muscles around it, it's tougher to target directly, to where the calf, being a lot smaller, a lot thinner, it's a lot more able to be targeted. I mean, I haven't taken a lot of significant calf strikes. Like I said, I had a coach previously who would target it, and generally by the time he had us limping, he would stop going for it. But I imagine it's very similar to the liver shot or the solar plexus, where there's this frustration of, I can't do anything about this. It's involuntary.
Interesting.
So that's all I got on the knockout, the finish. They cannot defend themselves. TKO, I think we were talking about this off camera a little as well. It's accumulation, typically. It's when guys are being overwhelmed. There's too many techniques being thrown. They can't keep up. A referee is looking out of their, for their safety. They're taking excessive strikes without sufficient defense, without sufficient counters and returns. One of my favorite ones to watch is Ronda Rousey versus Amanda Nunes. on a standing TKO.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Her coach screaming head movement as she's getting pounded in the face by, the pound for pound great.
Yeah. Did you watch the last one championship where somebody got knocked out right towards the end of the fight, and they had made a note like, "Oh, he should have taken a knee."
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, I did see
I forget
that.
who that was though.
Yeah, and that is the thing in kickboxing and Muay Thai. We spoke about it on the judging episode. I think it's Glory doesn't do standing 8 counts.
Yeah.
So you do have the option to drop to a knee to get the ref involved. But you don't have that option in MMA. I mean, you can drop to a knee, but now you have to deal with a follow-up. Another good standing TKO that I like a lot to rewatch is the Volkanovski versus Korean Zombie one that happened not too long ago.
Yeah.
He was lighting him up, and even going into the next round, he was saying, "Are you sure? You sure you want this?" And then he was able to, again, Korean Zombie's tough as one of the toughest featherweights of all time. He was taking the shots. He's on 2 feet, and even the last strike he had 2 hands up, but he's getting hit, and he's not throwing anything back. And the ref was watching his eyes. He could see that there's nothing left in him. So that's where we see standing TKOs.
Okay, here's another interesting fact from the cross-sectional performance analysis. In the guide, each weight class showed you the top finishes and their percentage of finish, right? So middleweight, 185 pounds. What do you think was the number one finish? You want to guess?
Middleweight. In recent years, I'm going to say knockout.
Okay, by way of...
Oh, are we talking specific strike?
Tool, yeah. Tool, not specific strike, but what was the tool? Punches, yeah. So 48.1% of middleweights finish by punches.
Nice.
Number one submission.
Rear naked choke.
Rear naked choke. So 15.5% of middleweights, that's the next one. So it's punches, then it's the rear naked choke. Then it actually goes back to kicks.
Nice.
12.9%. And then it goes to the beautiful 5.2% arm triangle.
Oh, wow.
And then 2.8% elbows.
Yeah.
So the top 5 tools that finish fights for middleweight is punches, rear naked choke, kicks, arm triangle, and then elbows in that order. But interestingly, every weight class is a little bit
slightly
different.
Changed.
Yeah. What it is exactly, what the finish is. So guys,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Can I guess the most constant one?
Sure.
Number one submission being rear naked choke.
Rear naked choke. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
When we get to that stat, I would like to
go ahead.
Well, before we get to the submissions, we were talking TKOs again. UFC, MMA. There's standing TKOs, and then you get that in your other combat sports as well. And then we get the ground and pound option. So we get a lot of TKOs that are on the floor, right? So maybe I score a takedown, get a good position. Now I unload on strikes, or maybe I drop you and I follow up with strikes on the ground. We do see a lot of TKOs on the floor this way. And again, it's just the same as a standing TKO. It's accumulation a lot of times, or maybe it's like 3 or 4 big strikes, and then the ref will stop it. One thing that I could pass on that I learned when I was in Vegas, I learned from John Wood, the head coach of Syndicate. He had this term that he would use called big and scary. So the concept was, if I'm in a dominant position, maybe I hurt you, or maybe I'm just in that position, I don't want to throw 20 what I would call 1-foot strikes, meaning the distance I'm traveling with my strike is just 1 foot. I'm better off, because the ref is trained to take care of this guy, I'm better off throwing 4 or 5 3-foot strikes.
Sure.
So now I'm being big and scary. And you can watch this, now that I've told you this, you can go watch TKO finishes. The ref is going to call
the big and scary
3 big strikes over 20 short ones like this.
Yeah.
You may still get the TKO here, but if we're talking about let's get this ref involved quicker, I want to make it look
Big and
scary.
scary.
One fighter you can look at if you know who he is, Khalil Roundtree.
Okay, I don't know who that is.
If you look up Khalil Rountree's finishes in the UFC, there's some of the most terrifying finishes, and that's his personality.
Big and scary.
That's his personality, but also he's one of John Wood's main students. He's been with him for a long time.
Okay.
And this concept I really found useful, even when I brought it back to Florida with me. This concept of big and scary to get the finish or to steal a round is super effective in a judge's mind.
Yeah, for sure.
And of course, in a ref's mind, my last fight that I cornered with Felicia, her final fight in the UFC, we use this term a lot, big and scary, big and scary. And it was going into the third round. She's dominating the first two, but everything's on the cage, and it's more occasional strikes. It's like a big elbow met with maybe 2 knees here and there. So she's on the ground. There's maybe a minute left in the fight. She's throwing punches. Maybe we'd call them 1-foot strikes, meaning from the strike start to the target, it's just 1 foot.
Yeah.
I see Mark Smith, the ref, is looking, but he doesn't look concerned. He doesn't look that concerned.
Okay, I got you.
So I say to Felicia, give Mark a reason to stop the fight. So she knows big and scary. So she steps up, she gets some posture, and she brings her elbow high, and she starts throwing bigger strikes.
Big and scary shots.
So she went from 40 1-foot strikes to about 5 big and scary strikes. The ref jumps in. We don't have to go to a decision. Felicia gets to retire with a finish.
Yeah, nice.
So that skill, that understanding of big and scary to get the finish really opened my eyes on how to get that finish.
super valuable.
Again, you can get finishes with short strikes, especially if you're like crucifixed.
Yeah.
But we're talking about majority. Go watch.
Big and scary.
Go watch fights. This weekend's card, whatever.
This is something I think that a lot of times fighters and coaches don't really want to be like super honest about, because the truth is that this is an entertainment sport, and I have to do stuff that's going to be entertaining, and big and scary is a part of that.
Yeah.
Right. I have to understand my role. And if you want to win a decision, if you want to win a stoppage, if you want a TKO, you have to make it look like you are the dominant fighter.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of times, like I always say to, like, when it comes to sweep in Muay Thai, the younger fighters, the newer fighters, they sweep somebody. And sometimes what do? They just kind of stand over top and look like they're surprised. Like, oh, wow, that worked.
It's just like in striking.
Yeah.
We call it watching your work, where you throw a punch and you take a picture and you're like, well, what a good punch. Like, it's just a move.
Whenever you do something, like you sweep somebody, make it look like that was intentional, man.
Yeah.
Give a little walk, throw your hand up in the air, and, invite them to get back up. Like, I'm not saying be mean about it, but what I'm saying is that you have to make it look like you are the dominant fighter from bell to bell.
Yeah.
Always. Whether that's a decision or that's demoralization or that is to get a TKO finish, right?
Yeah.
Look like you're the dominant fighter.
Absolutely.
Likewise, I don't care what's going on. If you look like you're not, if you look like you're taking a beating, and then you're upset that you got a stoppage, hey man, you didn't look like you were gonna respond, my man. Like, that's not my fault. That's on you. Make me aware that you can protect yourself. You know.
Another way to get a TKO, an injury or a cut. These are frowned upon if fighters are aiming for this. In our sport, people like this, like, honor code, and I agree. I think it's a beautiful thing in our sport.
Sure.
To injure someone intentionally,
damage
seems bad. Again, I'll go to Khalil Roundtree. He's got a knee stomp finish. He used a side kick to a guy's knee, absolutely blew everything out in the guy's knee. Vicious as all hell. God damn. But again, that is something you're allowed to do. You're allowed to injure fighters. You're also able to cut fighters and win that way.
I mean, this is the murder game.
Yeah.
Right. I hate to say that.
Oh, we talk about it all the time.
This is the murder game.
This is Rome. We're watching from the Colosseum. Everyone in there doesn't want to see the thumbs up. They want the thumbs down. That's what gets them the most hyped.
I think one of the craziest things that we see progressively over and over again through all of man's time on Earth is the creation of fighting, the creation of rules to govern fighting, and then the rules slowly fall apart or fall away until there are no rules. And then we go, we got to create some rules here. So they institute some rules. Like for most of you and ours life, the rules for MMA were increasing.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, the rules for MMA are decreasing, right? Like you know, in one championship, I can knee a downed opponent now, right?
Yeah.
So forever, I couldn't do that, right? For pretty much our entire lives, you couldn't get a bare knuckle
Anything.
Yeah. Now we have bare knuckle MMA.
Yeah.
We have bare knuckle boxing.
Come full
right?
circle.
It's so crazy how much that has changed. And interestingly, they had that special rules one fight that was with Wonder. I think it was it Wonder Girl?
Yes.
And somebody else. She lost. And it was essentially
they're Chinese strawweight champions.
maybe it was small glove boxing.
I watched it. Yeah.
That was bare knuckle rules.
Yeah.
That they were fighting bare knuckle rules, but with gloves
MMA
on.
gloves on.
Yeah, and I was like, I love this. All right,
I'm all for it.
Sign me
Again,
up.
I'm always gonna. We talked about it with one. I'm always gonna be a fan of advocating for athletes to have multiple business ventures.
Yeah, options.
One rule set. Yeah, that probably does favor a lot of fighters, but there's fighters out there who can adapt to many rule sets, and if they're gonna draw a fight that way, let it happen.
I think at the end of the day, like, you're not a great fighter if you're only able to dominate in a single rule set,
a limited rule set.
You know, like that's something that's interesting. All right.
So again, cuts. If you're aiming for cuts, no one likes that. Ken Flo, one of my favorite fighters to study back in the day, he had, I think, a final maybe 3 or 4 wins by cut. If you count one of his in-house Ultimate Fighter wins, I think he did 2 back-to-back in the UFC, where he clearly was intentionally. I mean, after the fight, he was taunting to all the elbows. I like the idea of trying to win by a cut. Again, it seems vicious or dishonorable, but is that more vicious than head kicking someone into retirement?
This is one of the weirdest things that we have. We have these very weird rules of, if I'm going to punch you in the face, I have to wear gloves.
Yeah.
But I can put my shin bone on your skull without any padding. Hey guys, FYI, if in case you have any question here, the bones of my hand are much smaller, less dense, and less painful than the bones of my leg.
Mm-hmm.
If I take my shin and put it across your skull versus my fist on your skull, how is that? Why are we so weird about gloves?
Yeah.
But we're cool with the shin thing.
I mean, I can literally fly into the air, grab your head
And
into
put
my knee,
yeah.
and on the way down, as you hit the canvas, I'm sledgehammering you with punches and elbows.
I mean, like,
but cutting a guy seems dishonorable.
But if anybody here loves elbows and they have a problem with cuts, elbow is a cutting tool. It is a knife tool. Okay, it literally in Muay Thai, from Muay Barong, when they fought with knives, all of the elbow strikes were knife slashes.
Yeah.
And then when the king of Thailand was like, "Oh, we can't be killing each other anymore. We got to create some rules here.
We need to keep a population growing.
We got to keep the army strong." All of those knife strikes became elbows.
Same thing with capoeira. It is a dance, right, to disguise their martial art. And when they fought back against slave owners and stuff, they had machetes.
Yeah.
So all this blocking with their forearms is actually blocking
with their machete
to come down with a machete. Yeah.
That's the next level. We need machete fighting.
Well, they have medieval fighting. But
I've seen that. Have you seen that?
Yeah, but those are pretty out of shape guys. When we get some of these capoeira guys, give them a little bit of armor.
Dude,
but
it's to the one guy out there that does the medieval fighting that listens to this. I'm sorry, but
you'd kill me if we had armor on.
Yeah, sure.
Without armor,
maybe
choking you out.
Oh,
Speaking of chokes,
good lord.
Now we can get past this is for all of our jiu-jitsu fans.
I have one more study on striking.
Oh, let's hear it.
Should we hit it? Okay.
Yeah.
So I might butcher this a little bit. I want to apologize. This study was published in 2020 by the University of Physical Education in, I believe it is Krakow, Poland. Okay. And the study was the effectiveness of kickboxing techniques and its relationship to fights won by knockout. Okay.
Nice.
So they looked at 188 fights, both amateur and professional, that ended in a knockout.
Love it.
This was all K1 rule set. Okay, so they were probably watching maybe Glory, maybe K1 when it was still around, but the study was published in 2020, so it is a new study. The average fighter had 7 years of experience that was in the study. It's a short study. It's an easy read. It's available online. If you Google, the effectiveness of kickboxing techniques and its relationships to fight won by knockout, you probably find this study. It's a couple pages. So some interesting things that they had, some interesting results they had. One, more time training did not improve knockouts.
Yep.
Okay, so it wasn't like, amateurs didn't get knockouts and pros did. Okay. Now, similar to the UFC, the number one technique in K1 style that led to a knockout. Do you want to guess?
Punch.
Punch, but they had a very specific. They listed what the punch was.
Can I say right hook?
Okay, it was hook. They did not delineate the difference between left and right.
I like that.
So the study, it said it was hook.
I did my own study.
Okay.
This is a few years ago. I want to say 2017. I watched every finish in Glory to that point. And I wrote down the strikes that were involved in the finishing sequence.
All right, I'm interested.
And the number one strike that I saw come up was the right hook.
Okay.
Which is very odd to me because, and we could do an episode on this for my whole time up until that point and even beyond it, I heard from all these.
Don't throw the right hook.
Don't throw the rear hook. It's a useless strike. It'll get you caught this way.
Straight line beats the hook.
Yeah. Or throw your lead hook because it's quicker to the target.
I was also taught this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a weird superstition. But then when I did the film study, I said, why is the right hook either knocking these guys out or leading to the next strike that knocks them out?
I think.
And now, just so everyone out there goes, if you're fighting one of my fighters, we're coming hooks both sides. we're not limiting just the lead hook.
Let's hope no one listens to this before your guys fight then. So of 188 fights, 36 ended with the hook.
Interesting.
They don't list if it's right or they did list it as a high hook, so a hook to the head, obviously. That was 19%.
Nice.
And I'm with you. I still to this day don't really teach the rear hook. I teach the rear overhand with the head coming off the line.
Yep.
But I'm not sure why that is. Maybe I'm just
I've gone the other way.
Product.
I've actually I teach the overhand less now because I find this habit, especially with men, that once you teach the overhand,
it's the only punch they throw.
Every technique goes out the window.
I'm with you on that one. I can name someone off there that I have that problem with.
Yeah.
Number two technique. Do you want to guess?
Number two
so
technique. Hook is number one.
Was number one.
I'm going
K1
to.
rule set.
I'm going to go either roundhouse to the head or knee to the head.
Roundhouse kick to the head.
Yeah.
26 finishes, 13.8%.
Love it.
Finish rate. Roundhouse kick to the head.
Number three, I'm going to guess, is knee to the head.
No, straight punch.
Straight punch.
Straight
okay.
punch,
all right. I'm actually a big fan. I say the best combo in the game is 1-2. It might not be the flashiest, funnest one to knock someone out with, but it is super effective.
So what's interesting there is that between the K1 style and the UFC style, punches are still a significant finisher, right? And obviously, there's no rear naked choke in K1. But
are you telling me axe kicks, spinning wheel kicks, and
okay, the axe kick was the least likely kick to finish a fight. By the way, they put that in the study. I didn't write it down, but
I tell people all the time. My very first MMA fight, I threw an axe kick, and it's a cool picture. I could pull it up on Facebook. I have a mustache. And I landed, just as my instructors taught me, I landed right on the collarbone.
Ooh,
I'm going to break his collarbone.
Fuck.
He TKO'd me 2 rounds later. It landed square. Heel to the collarbone. I'm like, he's not going to punch me anymore.
No, that's it.
Just like my masters taught me.
That's it.
After that, I started questioning the axe kick, and then that led me to questioning all kicks.
If
land an axe kick on their collarbone. They can't punch you
I might
anymore.
delete it after the fact, but I'm going to say it. Hindsight, if your coach asks you to call a master, that you may want to just go somewhere else immediately. Okay, here's interesting. The hook was the most used technique for both amateurs and professionals to end fights, right?
Yeah.
However, pros threw the hook on average twice as many times as amateurs.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that that was the number one finisher of both. But my thought process is that once something works one time, you're like, oh, I'm going to keep using that. That's a finish. Now, if you're at home, that means that you should be thinking two things. One, I've got to work on my hooks.
They seem effective.
I've got to work on my hook defense.
Ooh, you mean there's two sides of the coin?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, again, when you guys interpret data, you have to look at it at all angles as possible. The simplest one is the offensive defensive angle, and then you go into strategy. Again, when you're analyzing data, it's not just good to know the numbers. It goes.
If I know
deeper than
that the hook and the round kick, the recommendations for this study were that you should develop combinations that employ your use of hooks and round kicks.
Yeah, especially in K1 rule set,
absolutely,
because you're not allowed to elbow, you're not allowed to clinch.
And this is also something to be said about it. Like the roundhouse kick finished about the same as a kick in the UFC, right? But a lot of times people think like, well, you don't want to kick as much in the UFC because of takedowns and stuff like that. Well, the percentage finish is about the same.
Yeah.
So
it speaks of the effectiveness of the strike.
When it lands, it works, right? All right, so we're going to the ground game now, huh?
Submissions.
All right. Submission by position. Do you know what the UFC considers the best position to finish submission?
I would say back control.
Yeah, by 44%. 44% of submissions were by back control. Okay, do you want to guess what was one of the lowest places to finish a fight? By submission.
I would assume it's in your opponent's guard.
Guard was low.
Yeah.
But you know what was just as low? Mount. So I think that...
And isn't that crazy? Because when I first got into MMA, when a guy got mount...
It was over.
It was
over.
The ref is right in their face. The commentators are jumping up. It was almost as if the fight is ending now.
Yeah.
But now, mount's one of the most
I think
positions.
also, too, that, like...
It's great for ride time.
Yeah.
It's great for transitioning, but it's a not dominant position anymore.
So
it's still dominant, but...
I'm going to butcher this guy's name. There's a guy out there. His name is Chris... he is one of the first American black belts in the United States. I forget his name. He's an older gentleman. His name is Chris something. I could probably Google that, Jamie, but I'm not going to. But he has a whole thing where he talks about positional control is based off strikes, right? Like, what is the best position to strike from? Mount is the best position to strike from. And better than back control, if you think about it. It's hard to strike from back control. It's very easy to get...
Unless we're allowed to elbow the back of the head. Yeah.
It's very easy to get big and scary from mount, right?
100%. Ooh, I like that you're using that term.
So the hierarchy of positional jiu-jitsu is based on striking position. Guard is not great. Side control is better. Half guard is better. Side control is better than half. Mount is the best position to strike from. Now, the level of jiu-jitsu has improved so significantly that side control is not that great anymore to strike from. Most people stay in half guard. I've said that before.
Yeah.
You still want to get to mount if you can to strike. But when you get someone to mount and start striking, what do they typically do?
They're going to turn their back.
They roll to their back for your submission, right? And that's one of the things that I've said a lot about jiu-jitsu is that a lot of jiu-jitsu is based off of, if you watch the Gracie in action videos, we're talking pre-UFC, they would get a guy in mount, they would start smacking him in the face, he would roll to his back, and then they would RNC.
Yeah.
Right.
And I remember watching, I forget if it was the Hickson documentary or some documentary that was following the Gracie in action videos, but they were speaking about they intentionally used smacks instead of punches, not because they weren't allowed to punch, but because they wanted to show the effectiveness of jiu-jitsu. Had I had been allowed to elbow or punch, I don't even need to choke you.
Yeah.
But yeah, they turned their back. I turned my last MMA fight, I turned my back. Broke my heart. Caught in a rear naked choke. I don't get choked as easily.
The wins are fleeting. The losses last forever.
Forever. It will probably be my dying breath.
Please. I turned my back.
Yeah. So yeah, top submissions in MMA. I really think this is an important thing because I know in my experience, most gyms, it's an MMA gym, so you have all your MMA fighters there. They're going to take their Muay Thai class. They're going to take their kickboxing class. They're going to take their jiu-jitsu class. They may take their wrestling class. And in all those classes, you're learning a bunch of different things. As the individual fighter, it can be tough sometimes to pick what you should focus on for competition. If I'm taking a jiu-jitsu class and we're doing omoplata sweeps into knee bars, I have to look at that and go, is this actually going to help my MMA career, or is this helping me in jiu-jitsu?
What are the top submission finishes?
So, top submission finishes in MMA. I should have wrote my site down, but this is from a record-keeping article, and it went up to 2022. So
Okay.
this is in the UFC rounded up submission percentages.
Sure.
Number one is rear naked choke.
Of course.
49%. That's massive. Almost half of submission chokes are rear naked chokes. These are all the chokes, I should say. I think I said total submissions. These are the percentage
of submission.
chokes.
Yeah, I got you.
So guillotine choke, and this is including arm in guillotine,
Okay.
is at 24%.
Sure.
So that's a strong number one, 49%. Nearly half of chokes are rear naked chokes, and then a quarter of the chokes are guillotine.
So then just simple math. Everything else is going to be minuscule compared to that.
Comparatively speaking,
Yeah.
we're going to get into lower ones. So number 3 is the arm triangle. Number 4 is the triangle choke.
Okay.
And then number 5, gaining popularity in the last few years, the Darce choke.
Darce, yeah.
Yeah.
What percentage was the Darce?
Darce is 3.5%.
What percentage was arm triangle?
9%.
9%. Okay.
Yeah, so just under 10. And then the triangle choke itself is 8%.
Which is funny because you and I both know that early UFC, the triangle choke was a game. It was an ender.
If you have a good triangle choke, you're pulling guard. You're allowing takedowns.
Yeah.
Nowadays, if you have a good triangle choke, you're Brian Ortega. You're one guy. You're Charles Oliveira.
Yeah.
Like, we're picking... that's something I also, when I looked at the UFC numbers and stuff, I found it very interesting how some of these numbers, I'm surprised this is a higher percentage. And then you find out it's from one fighter.
Yeah, one guy.
There's like a 0.03% Ezekiel chokes. Guess who's got all the Ezekiel chokes?
Yeah.
One guy. The Darce choke. I mean, Tony Ferguson, I think, holds like a third of the Darce chokes.
I mean, like, you could make that argument when Ronda Rousey was on a run that the armbar was probably the most dominant
female submission
at the time, right?
And
like
it's one fighter hitting arm bars.
Yeah, that she just did it every time.
So joint locks, I don't have a percentage on this.
Okay.
But number 1 was arm bar.
Okay.
That could be any arm bar, any full arm extension from side control, knee on belly, back control.
Kimura is going to be 2.
Kimura is number 2.
Sure.
Key lock and Americana, that interchangeable one.
Yeah.
Elbow down. Heel hook, number 4. And then knee bar, number 5.
Interesting.
When you look at the scope of all of the submissions, when you're looking at them, like what is the highest percentage, chokes are far higher percentage than joint locks. The arm bar and the Kimura, I think overall are like number 4 and number 5 on total submissions.
Sure.
So again, when you look at that, you have to go, well, I want strong rear naked choke attacks and defense. Obviously, if you don't increase your attack, definitely increase your defense. Of course, I want the guillotine. That seems to be highly effective. And then after that, you can start to pick and choose a little more arm triangle, Darce.
Have that one thing.
Yeah, maybe mix it up. Now, again, there's the outliers, guys like Ryan Hall. A friend of mine, Jordan Levitt, he's got a lot of wacky submissions. His pro debut, he hit a Peruvian necktie.
Yeah.
So there's some nuances that you can get into.
I think that there is. I think there's also a bit. I'm going to say this out loud, and I might get some hate from people, but I think it's very true. I think that our coaching has not even begun to touch the quality of where the sport could be.
Yeah, for sure.
And because the coaching has not touched where the quality of the sport could be, the sport has not touched where it could be.
Yeah.
And one of the things I mean by that is that if you know that the rear naked choke, the guillotine, are dominant finishes, and I come to a class and you're teaching a spider guard or something weird.
Buggy choke.
Yeah.
Man, you really hate the spider guard.
I hate spider guard. I hate it with an absolute passion.
Yeah.
Because you know why I don't like it? Because it only works in gi.
Yeah.
And maybe if you have a winter coat on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that
Strong
jiu-jitsu
jacket.
in general should work regardless of what
attire you have.
they are wearing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It just, I find that to be such an unfortunate aspect of that game. And I like jiu-jitsu. I'm not saying that I don't. What I'm just saying is that, a rear naked choke works regardless. And then all of the collar chokes are just really me playing with rear naked chokes, right?
Yeah.
I'm just I'm in this, I have your back. I'm playing with your collar.
I'm making a knot out of your neck.
Yeah,
in this
sure.
t-shirt.
Okay, yes. All I'm doing is trying to cut off your carotids and make you go to sleep. I give you all that. There's not a lot of translation on a spider guard.
No.
I find it to be very frustrating.
Yeah.
I don't like being involved in it. I don't like training it. I don't care to know more about it.
And again, jiu-jitsu is a fantastic sport in itself. Submission grappling, if you want to add all the different styles.
Sure.
I think that sport itself is fantastic. I'm a fan of it. I work locally with the submission grappling series, and I love watching those matches. It's not, again, indicative to MMA when you start adding strikes.
It's a different,
Again, there's a reason why heel hooks and knee bars are so low percentage. It's not the fact that, because now we see in jiu-jitsu, everyone's doing them.
Yes.
But in the sport of MMA,
strikes.
If you don't have a good position on that leg, you're getting TKO'd.
I mean, inversions in general, you know what I mean? Like deep half guards. These are things that you're not.
It's less common and less effective when you start adding the possibility that they can knock you out, especially in one where they can knee in the face.
This goes also back to I forget what this guy's name is. It's going to kill me. But one of his fundamental rules for jiu-jitsu is that I have to be able to control the arms at all times. If I can't control his arms, I can't protect myself.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of stuff in jiu-jitsu where they're no longer protecting the arms.
Oh, yeah. The arm is the last concern. They're so concerned about trapping the leg or doing some jump spin to the back.
It's fun to watch. It's
phenomenal.
I'm not.
Again, it's forever evolving, but again, it's a limited rule set. When we're talking MMA, there's so many possibility. Room for error can change very quickly. One of the rarest submission by strike.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not common. It was actually deemed a TKO, but the one I always like to think about when someone asks, like, "Oh, can someone quit from striking?" is George St. Pierre versus Matt Serra.
Yes. Okay.
It was called a TKO.
Yes.
But if you watch the replay, and there's a video out there of George St. Pierre talking about,
right?
He reaches out and he taps the mat as he's getting hit. And a big reason why guys will tap to strikes is because they've checked out.
They're overwhelmed.
They're overwhelmed, and they know
I'd like to leave now, please.
I need to fight another day. Today's not the day.
Yeah, I'd like to leave now, please.
If you can get a guy to submit to strikes, two things are happening. You did a really good job destroying his game, or you have a really mean ref. That ref is not looking for that fighter's
So, fun fact. Do you know what the first recorded submission in the UFC was?
Rear naked choke?
Nope.
What is it?
Let's put it this way. The guy was wearing a boxing glove.
Oh, that was the first one?
First one. Do you remember what he submitted to?
It had to have been an armbar.
Nope. It was mount.
That's so funny.
Okay, so the rumor is that Big John McCarthy, before he was a referee...
I remember that's Art Jimerson, right?
Okay.
That was...
Yes. Big John McCarthy, before he was a referee, was just a Gracie Jiu-Jitsu student
right?
and was in the locker room, because they had a shared locker room, and was talking epic poo-poo to this guy, telling him, we're going to get your neck, we're going to get your arm, we're going to break your arms, we're going to choke you out until you die. And the guy was so afraid that the minute that Hoist mounted him, he tapped.
That's hilarious.
So the first ever recorded submission in the UFC is tap out due to mount. Imagine that guy.
Yeah.
The one glove.
Yeah, that's a rough introduction.
Oh man. What happened? How'd you get tapped?
But again,
he mounted me.
that's the psychology of it, right? They kind of got in his
Yeah.
head, and then he was overwhelmed because he doesn't know how to buck and roll.
We should
and catch
get
an
like
arm.
we should get like a psychologist or just somebody that has some thoughts on this. We should bring him in and do an episode on the psychology of fighting. But I always tell my guys, this is so off subject, that when you're watching a fight, you can typically watch and see one guy's morale improving and one guy's morale decreasing. And it's almost like a bar in martial arts. Like, oh, this guy's getting more confident. Oh, this other guy's getting less confident.
Yeah.
Right? All right, so submissions. Where are we at, Bubba?
That's pretty much what I have.
Nice.
Again, I think it's really important to take note on the percentage of submissions, recognizing which ones are strong. Maybe you've got a couple in the gym that are not on the list or lower on the list. I think it's still important to train those because you never know when they come up. And as a business sense, those rare submissions will get you a fight bonus.
Oh, yeah.
But so does rear naked choke. So does guillotine
So
choke.
does a head kick. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. Make combinations out of these submissions. If we're talking chokes, you should have a guillotine to armbar to triangle attack. You want to make combinations of these moves, not just one-off moves. I think a lot of jiu-jitsu and MMA coaches are doing these nowadays, maybe the last 7-8 years that I've been around the sport. But back in the day, I remember speaking about this with my jiu-jitsu coaches and such, going, shouldn't we focus on rear naked chokes? Why am I doing go-go plata?
Yeah.
I can think of one fight that ended in go-go plata. I can't think of how many fights ended in rear naked choke.
I think there's a lot of gyms that are teaching MMA, but really they're teaching sport jiu-jitsu. They're teaching Muay Thai-ish. And they have some kind of wrestling.
Yeah.
And they're calling that MMA. It's probably not that. I have a theory that
is it a combat theory?
Yeah, it's actually I hate you on that one. That 200, 300 years from now, when you walk into a martial arts school, there'll be 2 options, maybe 3 options. Option 1 would be for sport, and it'll be some form of MMA.
Mm-hmm.
For self-defense, it'll be some type of essentially MMA, but for the street.
Yeah.
And then there may be some remnants of these other martial arts that are purely for, like, dance. You know, like, oh, we're going to do
like a Tai Chi or a
Tai
capoeira
Chi,
style.
yeah. But kendo or something. But I think that the sport is evolving to a self-defense style and a competitive style. I say this a lot. The kid that walks into a gym today, 4, 5, 6 years old, he's unlikely to be doing a single martial art. He's going to be doing multiple martial arts, right? So it might be hard for him to delineate the difference between what is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and what is wrestling and what is kickboxing, because that's all one martial art that he's been practicing.
It's fighting to them.
It's fighting.
Yeah.
It's fighting. You know, like it's competitive fighting or it's self-defense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you should train for whatever reason you want to train for. And I've said this before. I think I went to college because the only thing in life I really enjoyed was teaching martial arts, and I wanted to have a college education.
Yeah.
But, you know, it is what it is. I think you should always keep training and doing what you want to do. Any thoughts on our next episode? What are you thinking?
We're still working on a guest.
Yeah, there's some rumors. There's rumors.
It's just a matter of scheduling.
I've been randomly messaging like celebrities.
Yeah.
Like, hey, do you want to come on the show?
I like that.
They don't respond, but one of them will be like, screw it.
If we get Jack Black on the show, that'll be a huge
my God, dude. Jack Black, I'll sign up. You know, I've wondered if we could get Taylor Swift onto the show.
No, I'm going to shoot you down right now. Don't wait.
You don't think Taylor Swift would come on the show?
She's the biggest star in the world, I hear.
But Jennifer Lawrence.
That's more likely.
That's my hall pass. Jennifer Lawrence, obviously you're listening. If you want to come on the show, I will kick my girlfriend out of the house. I'm just saying, you know what I mean? Like, she doesn't have to be here. We could just do the episode without Rich. You know.
Hopefully not. My big takeaways on this episode, if we were to kind of wrap it up
on page there.
Yeah. If we were to wrap it up, again, if you see yourself as someone who wants to finish fights,
okay,
you need to do your study, not just on other fighters, but you yourself. One thing I always thought going into my competition career, the second I land this head kick, this guy's done. In my first fight, I landed 5 head kicks.
He was not done.
I axe kicked his collarbone, and he TKO'd me in the 3rd round. The only time I've ever TKO'd someone was through teep to a body.
Okay.
I did it accidentally my first Thai fight. The guy was just hurt to the body, so I was like, I threw everything to his body. I threw punches. I threw a spinning back fist to his body. I'd kneed him a bunch of times, and once he was tired, obviously, I went with the teep, and the teep landed, and then he folded, and then didn't continue. And I go, wow, there's something there. And then I developed my whole game on wearing guys out and then touching them with the teep. And now I didn't always get the finish that way. It only happened 3 times, but I would win decisions based on this simple idea that I don't have knockout power. I don't have kicks that put guys to sleep. I don't have punches that put guys to sleep. But I have a gas tank. I have the ability to win decisions, and I do have this ability to consistently land a teep.
I think one of the things that what you're talking about or what you're discussing is that your training is you should not be training for that one big shot.
Mm-hmm.
You should be training about progressively, indirectly attacking, distract and destroy, train big and scary, do these things, these techniques that we talk about on the show. What is going to win me this fight, right? Do I understand how to go low to go high? Do I understand, that the hook punch is probably one of the most devastating finishings, right?
Yeah.
How good is my head kick, right? Am I able to set stuff up so that I can get their hands low to get that head kick, right?
When I attack, can I do multiple ranges in one attack?
Yeah.
That's huge.
How good am I at slowing the pace down?
Mm-hmm.
How good am I about, speeding the pace up?
Can I explode? What am I exploding with?
Do I have the cardio that's going to allow me to do those things? Do I have the mental capacity to know? Do I have the fight IQ to know when I need to use what tools I need to use?
Mm-hmm.
Right. These are all the things that lead to a fight finish. Right. I agree with the. I think the oldest thing said in the UFC is never let it go to the judges.
Yeah,
it's true. It's true. You need to finish fights. If I am a MMA fighter, my rear naked choke should be exceptional,
mm-hmm.
and my defense of the rear naked choke should be exceptional.
It should be, if we're talking about really, if you're serious about competition, it should be obsessive how much you train rear naked choke defense, guillotine defense, and then go into the other ones, of course. But those 2 submissions alone hold so many finishes that if you don't have the ability to defend them, you're increasing your chances of losing.
I think something also, too, that I think is really, really important is that this is not a game that you can play like occasionally or part-time. If you're going to be a competitive fighter, even if you're going to be an amateur competitive fighter, you need to have a relentless pursuit of these things.
Mm-hmm.
We said this on an episode before. I think you said so many people want to work on offense, never want to work on defense, right?
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to be great at this, you need to go look at, okay, what's the finishes in my division and what are the most common defenses? What are the most common offenses? How do I set those things up? Hey, I'm not very good at this. I need to get better at it. Hey, Rich, I have a question for you. I wanted to ask. How do you feel about coaches incentivizing finishes?
I love it.
So something that I was doing while I was still coaching was for anybody, if they got a finish, I gave them $100 out of my pocket, right? I'd fold $100 bill, put it in my pocket. I would tell wherever we went, I'd be like, hey man, and mostly I'm training amateurs. I'm training low-level pros. They're not making a huge amount of money.
Most coaches are.
Yeah. And I'd say, hey man, if I'm trying to build a program here, I want to finish. You know, I'm as a Muay Thai coach. Muay Thai is knockouts is something I would say often. And if you get a finish today, I'm giving you $100 cash right now.
Yeah.
Out of my own pocket. I think you have to find ways as a coach to first train finishes, some of the things we talked about today. And then 2, you've got to incentivize your fighters to get finishes. It doesn't have to be money. It could be, you know, I don't know. Give them something on the wall. You know what I mean? Like set up a highlight reel.
If you're the owner of the gym, maybe give them free month, free 2 months.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, if you get a finish in this fight, put your shirt on that says our name. You get free gym for the, you know, rent for the month or whatever.
Yeah, I think incentivizing fighters for sure. That's huge. I think one of the big mistakes I've made in the past is kind of like one mold a lot of my fighters.
Okay.
Right? And then what you have to realize as a coach a lot of times is every fighter's different.
Sure.
Some of their best moves are uniquely theirs. You need to kind of game plan how to utilize those moves in such a way that they can use it on multiple types of opponents. But also, I think it's really important for the fighter to understand that they're the one making the decisions.
Yes.
Everything you do when it comes to combat sports may be practiced in a group setting or a team setting, but at the end of the day, you're the one guy in the ring. And again, it goes into your training. You should be picking who's teaching you, and then what are they teaching you? What are you pulling from that to build your game? If you're not doing that kind of work, you're just going with the flow, letting your coach show 20 different moves that don't necessarily translate to MMA well, you're doing yourself a disservice. And as you said, this is not a game. You know, we don't play fighting. This is your health on the line. This is your vagus nerve being stimulated by a head kick.
The amateur fighter and the pro fighter take the same amount of head damage, right? I mean, like amateur fighters don't somehow use the word amateur so they get less brain damage.
Right.
Right. All right, guys. I appreciate you so much for listening to the show. Season 3, episode 4. I hope that you enjoyed it, guys. Please, if you like the episode, comment, you know, follow us on social media, Combat Theory on Instagram, you know, like, subscribe. Reviews are amazing if you can do them. And hopefully we're going to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina for the East Coast Classic. We'll both be there at the end of the month. And
I've got a fighter on there. Hopefully we get 2 finishes and I can come back.
Nice.
And Paul's going to pay me $200?
Maybe I will. I don't know. It's going to be in doll hairs, my friend.
Oh.
So we might have, I haven't talked to Rich about this yet because we got to see what our week's like, but we might have a special episode coming to you from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
Oh, fun.
You know, if we got some free time, I'll let you know.
Are we taking the studio with us?
Yeah, we're going to take some components of the studio and see what we can get away with. I have an idea that I can do we'll do like a hotel room sesh if we got some free time, but we might be a little delirious and who knows, we may even have a guest if we can find somebody to talk to us. It might be a random front desk guy or something, but we'll get a guest. All right, guys, goodbye. Thank you so much. Bye, Rich.
See you, Paul.